Hey, yo, it's me, Pops Fan Marmalade, and you're watching the Comics-Related Madness Network. Huh? So come get some. CromCon. CromCon.
Hey, we want to shout out to our sponsors, Daytona Beach Comic Con. If you are a fan of comic books, if you're a fan of comic book conventions, and if you like meeting comic book creators and getting comics and comic-related stuff, then you need to make your plans to attend Daytona Beach Comic Con. This year's show is September 7th and 8th. Silverline will be there, so you should make your plans to be there too. We'll see you there. If you like comics and find yourself in the Orlando, Florida area, doesn't everyone come to Orlando at some point in time to see the House of Mouse? But when you're here, you need to make it a point to visit Coliseum of Comics, especially the one on East Colonial Drive. They carry Silverline comics, even a limited edition Coliseum of Comics version of our comics. So, when you go, be sure to ask for Silverline Comics and tell them we sent you. OCD stands for Orlando Collector Deviants. OCD, Steve and Trish. They're a family of geeks who promote geek things, particularly those around the Orlando, Florida area. They're big supporters of Silverline, and we think you should be supporters of theirs too. Go give them some love. If you are an independent comic book maker and you need to get your independent comics made, you need to look no further than Kablam Digital Printing. They print our books, and they do a bang-up job. They're not only trusted by Silverline, but many, many independent comic book makers. Head on over to kablam.com and see for yourself just how easy it is to have your comic printed by them. And tell them Silverline sent you.
Hi, this is Tim TK, host of That Silverline Show on Tuesday. Join us at 11 p.m. Eastern, 8 p.m. Pacific every Tuesday night as we discuss pop culture and the joys of making comics.
Hi, I'm Barb Gelder, co-host of Silverline's Wednesday Wham. Join us each Wednesday night as we discuss comics, literature, movies, and anything else that may catch our attention.
I'm Roland Mann, and I host Silverline's Silver Sunday. Join me every Sunday at 8 p.m. Eastern as we make mine Silverline. Welcome to a Silverline Silver Sunday, this Sunday, June the 23rd. I am your host, Adam Roland Man, and I am so excited about tonight. We are going to have a fun night tonight. I am joined, of course, by Silverline's Summertime Idiot. I didn't call you that. Mr. Tom Mason.
Hi, everybody. Welcome to the show.
How you doing, Tom?
Good, Roland.
And we are joined, of course, by that man in the mask guy, Mr. Mike W. Belcher.
Howdy, howdy, howdy.
And crashing the party tonight from the Tuesday crew, Mr. David Rios. Color me what?
Tell me what. Hi, how you doing?
Good. And, of course, tonight we are so excited to be joined by legendary comic creator, Mr. Matt Wagner.
Hey, everybody.
Welcome.
Excellent. So we are excited to talk to you tonight. Matt, why did I get my picture smaller? There. Oh, there we go. But now you got Silverline on your head. Hold on. Let me move that.
Silverline on the brain.
Yes.
This happens every week.
Matt, really, if you're an independent comic book person, you should not need an introduction to Mr. Wagner. He's been around for a long, long time. In fact, I would say he was here when independent comics were all the rage in the 1980s. They weren't called independent comics at the time, right? They were called alternative comics.
Yep,
that's right. So now we call them indies.
Because you started, if I remember this correctly, you started publishing just before the big black and white boom.
Yeah. And then we switched to color before the black and white boom. Yeah.
Okay. It's timing.
Our keen business acumen led us to color was necessary at that point.
It still worked out.
So before we get to that part, because we want to hear all about that, tell us. So we want to know a little bit about your origin story. Where did you grow up? Where did you first? Where were you introduced to comics as a kid?
I grew up in the middle of Pennsylvania, very rural, kind of in the middle of Amish country. I was an only child. My parents had kind of reached the point in their life where they had tried to have kids, didn't work. They decided we're going to kind of move out into farm country and get a place where my dad could have a horse. And they moved in there, and 3 months later, she was pregnant. So I grew up kind of remotely, and my mom was an English teacher, so she always encouraged me to read, and I did. We had our local library had a summer contest, not really a contest, but if you read 10 books over the course of the summer, you got a certificate with 10 gold stars on it. I usually got 2 every summer. But I love drawing as well, because there wasn't a lot of video entertainment in those days, and I drew to entertain myself, and comics were reading and drawing all in one tidy and beautiful little package, and unlike a lot of English teachers of her day, my mom didn't mind that I was reading comics. I was reading. She thought I would grow out of them. I grew into them, she was very, both my parents were very accommodating in buying me comics. Of course, in those days, access was limited. It was only what was at your drugstore spinner rack, and you couldn't count on getting more than one issue in a row sometimes. But one thing Mom always contributed to the pile of comics in my room was the fact that at that point at the grocery store, at the point of purchase on the way out, where now you have the National Enquirer and Us Magazine and all that horse shit. Right. They had a big rack of Classics Illustrated. So she would buy me Classics Illustrated. And that was my first exposure to Robert Louis Stevenson and Dickens, and Shakespeare, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So I had a kind of literate exposure to comics, in addition to a very exciting exposure to comics too, because I read everything in those days. Again, very non-discriminating. I loved Batman, I loved Spider-Man, I loved Mickey Mouse, everything.
Yeah. At what point in time did in doing all this? At one point in time, or maybe if you can remember, what comic was it that made you say, "This is what I want to do. This is what I want to spend my years of heartbreak as an adult"?
No particular comic that I can point to as a touchstone moment, but my parents had one of those school memory scrapbooks, a pre-printed scrapbook that came with a spot to put your picture, a little envelope to put your projects, your height, your weight, all that stuff.
Yeah.
On the grade school years, on the back of each page, it said what I want to be when I grow up. And one year, 1967, I wrote astronaut, which was the year they landed on the moon, and everybody wanted to be an astronaut, right?
That's right.
Every other year, I wrote comic book writer.
Oh, okay. Well, if you can't be an astronaut, comic writer is the
two are somewhat connected. Yeah.
You need a fallback position. That's the key.
And I put writer because I just assumed, I didn't realize there was a team usually. I assumed whoever I always loved the art, but I was mainly swept up by the stories. The stories took me places. Again, I grew up kind of lonely as an only child, and the stories provided me an outlet to all sorts of worlds that I didn't have access to. And so the writer, to my mind, at that point in my life, was the most important part.
Yeah. Got a few comments coming in here already. Hojo says, "Big fan, Mr. Wagner."
Let me turn on my comments there. There we go.
We can always rely on Hyper. Thank you, Hyper. Hyper says, "Like and subscribe, kids." Absolutely. Make sure you guys hit the like buttons, the thumbs up, the dings, the stars. Like and subscribe to whatever and wherever you're listening to us. Quantum says, "I'm a huge Matt Wagner fan. His work is a great influence on my own. I'd love to interview him on my channel one day. I'm not quite ready yet, though." Quantum.
When you are, you can find me online pretty easily. So,
but here's what I'm going to say, though, Quantum. There's no better day than today. Don't wait. Don't wait. You just never know.
Because really, what are you waiting for to get online?
Yeah,
that's right. Yeah, I mean,
get some startup capital.
The worst you can do is make him mad, and then he'll just click off the button and leave. And then what? What's that? Then what? All right, so.
But well, I just wanted to fill in one other kind of touchstone moment. So again, not a specific comic book, but my first introduction to a comic book, which was one weekend my parents took a vacation by themselves. So they went to a slightly more urban area, and they had stopped into a bookstore, and my mom brought me home Jules Pfeiffer's The Great Comic Book Heroes, which was one of the first hardback collections. So that I don't know if you're all familiar with that, but it had the first Superman stories, the first Batman stories, Hawkman, first Flash story.
Wow.
So I was just overwhelmed with all of a sudden this megaton bomb of original comics dropped into my lap, and it was in the form of a hardcover book, and that really kind of changed my attitude on kind of what these things could and should be someday. You know?
Yeah, it's like a real book, like you get out of the library.
Yeah.
Well, that's what I was going to ask. Is it because it wasn't in the floppy format?
Correct. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. It had a certain highbrow approach. You know, it seemed bona fide to you.
Yeah. We're still working on that. I teach at the university.
Brother, where art thou?
Yeah, we're still working on the whole bona fide and respectable part. You know.
Yep.
All right. So you go there. This is what you want to be. How did you break in? What from the middle of farm country, Pennsylvania? How did you go from? What was your first work? How'd you get into?
It was kind of a two-stage process. So I went to two different colleges. I went to my parents were living originally in Pennsylvania, but then later they moved to, my dad's job moved him to Virginia, rural Virginia, about an hour and 20 minutes directly west of DC. And I ended up going to a Virginia university, James Madison University.
Okay.
Big, very traditional school, tree-lined quad, graystone buildings, frats, sororities, all that shit. Like a very typical, stereotypical college experience.
They still wore powdered wigs in those days too.
Yeah, pretty damn close. Yeah,
you were Tom's neighbor.
But I was there for 2 years, and during those 2 years, I produced a comic strip for the on-campus newspaper.
Okay.
Which had a pretty big circulation. There was like 30,000 copies came out twice a week. And they had won some awards and such. It was a very, very kind of, I don't want to say pro amateur effort, you know?
Yeah.
And,
man, if only we could get that kind of circulation today,
more
right?
Importantly, I became their, what originally they called their graphic artist. And they later upped my title to being the graphics editor, which was just another name for the same job. But what that amounted to was the 2 nights the 2 nights during the week that they went to press, which were Wednesday and Sunday night. I had to show up at the offices around 9:00 at night, and they already had the paper laid out. And wherever they had a dead space, where they had no ad, no copy, no photo, I had to do an illustration to fill in there. And sometimes I had free reign. Sometimes they had, we needed a photo of a student arguing with his landlord about a busted water main, that
right,
sort of stuff.
Right.
In another article, they did an article about the popularity of Dungeons and Dragons on campus. So I got to do this great Dungeons and Dragons drawing, But the most significant effect that had on me was I couldn't leave till that shit was done every night. And usually took me till 2:00, 3:00 in the morning.
Wow.
And so for the first time in my life, I wasn't drawing because I wanted to. I was drawing because I had to.
Yeah.
And so I was under deadlines, and it was like boot camp. I figured out how to make things work and how to not be overly precious about stuff, how to take things through to a stage of completion and let it roll, And for that, I got a 1 credit A per semester and about $35 a month, which back in 1980, I thought I was on top of the world, man.
Man, the number of comics you can buy for $35 in 1980.
Yep.
Oh, yeah.
So then after a couple years there, I had a drawing teacher that was really influential on me. And he said, "You're too good for here. You need to get out of here. You need to go to an art school." And his brother was enrolled in the Philadelphia College of Art. So I applied and I went up there. So I had gone from this extremely traditional, as I said, quad, graystone buildings, frats, sororities, that kind of college environment, to a deep inner city college environment. Everything was in one giant skyscraper. It was all crazy ass art students from every walk of life. And it was just 180 degrees in the other direction. And I was I now realize what a beneficial experience that was for me to break through any preconceptions I had and take me in a new direction, you know?
Yeah.
And so one day I get on the elevator and there's a guy with a Creation Conventions t-shirt on. And I don't know if any of you are old enough to remember Creation Conventions. At one point, they were the only convention line.
Gary Berman and Adam Nealon.
Yes, exactly. And most of them were run by Bob Schreck, who later, you know, became my brother in arms, and we worked together a million years, and he was my brother-in-law for a while, and etc. So I struck up a conversation with this dude. I was like, "Oh, comics, blah 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 blah," and that guy introduced me to another guy, and they turned out to be two of the guys that ultimately dropped out and formed Kamiko, my initial publisher. So after a couple of years of going to school there, these guys dropped out and and had some financial backing from the one guy's brother, and wanted to launch this publishing venture. And I followed them. It was, let me tell you, not a popular decision with my parents. And you know, those first several years were incredibly lean and a little despairing, and you know, we didn't know what the hell we were doing, and we shot off in a lot of different directions, you know. But you know, my first thing for them was the 8-page story that introduced Grendel. So that was the beginning of a long run, you know.
This particular
that's
one?
the one right there, dude.
Wow. Hold that there for a second, Dave. There we go. Wow, look at that.
Yeah.
Look at that. Kamiko. Wow. We got a handful of other comments here. Let me run through those, catch us up here. Pop says, if you like what we do and want to join the Madness Entertainment Group, contact us at the Pops, blah, blah, blah. Reach out to Pops. We are part of the Madness Network, and we are excited to be part of the network. Hopefully a lot of you guys coming and watching us now are seeing us on the network. Brian says, what up, fellas? What's up, Brian? Thank you for hanging out with us tonight. Let's see. Quantum Age says, this is a bunch of highs. Hyper says, Matt is a legend and fits in well with this group of fine gentlemen. Well, you are all too kind, Hyper. Thank you so much. Apex says, hail, Matt Wagner. Geek Men, Masters of the Thunder Nerd says, howdy, y'all. What is up, Geek Men? Glad you could join us. Apex Comics says, a friend of mine from the 90s said I had a similar art style like yours, and that was a great compliment.
Thank you.
We agree with that, Apex. Let's see here. A bunch of hellos. Let's see. Apex says, starting a comic book company, you tend to go into poverty.
Well, you know the joke, right? How do you make $1 million in comics? You start with two.
Start with two.
$2 million.
All right, we got a good question here. David A. Gutierrez, thank you for hanging out with us, David. Good to see you here. What was the inspiration for Grendel's look and choice of weapon?
Perfect segue. So, you know, I talked a little bit about how I got into the publishing end of it, but how did I come up with Grendel? So, you know, I was really intrigued by the concept of a villain as the main character. And you got to remember, back in those days, that wasn't a thing. There really wasn't any of those. Marvel had tried a couple times to do a book called Supervillain Team Up. It would only last for an issue or so, because everybody knew those guys weren't the real character. They were, you know, they were the substars in other books, you know. And DC did a book, tried to launch a Joker series. It only lasted 2 issues. Can you imagine that? I mean, you know, the Joker's so ridiculously popular now, you know. And so when I was about 11 or 12, I read a book called Grendel, which was by an author named John Gardner, and it was the story of Beowulf told from the point of view of the villain, of the ogre, and sympathetic to the ogre. And that really kind of like threw me, like, wow, you can tell stories like this, you know, you can tell stories not from the heroic point of view, because of course, you know, when you're young, you love those superhero things. And then as you start to get a little older into your teens, you realize, yeah, the good guy doesn't always win. And, you know, look around the world.
Right.
Bad guys get away with a lot of shit and they never get put in jail. And then when I was at the latter few years in high school, a friend of mine introduced me to the works of Michael Moorcock, and specifically the Elric saga. And Elric was this fascinating character to me because he was the exact opposite of Conan. You know, Conan's this, like, you know, brash, muscular, beefy character that, you know, always kind of blunders his way into the world of right. And Elric was this fey, sorceress, morally ambiguous character who you somehow still liked and rooted for, even though he did a lot of horrible shit. You saw him doing terrible stuff all the time, and he ends up killing everybody he has ever loved. And that really resonated with me too. I was like, wow, you can tell stories like that too and be totally intrigued with that kind of character. And so I went down the road trying to come up with a character like that. And I will point out that Grendel premiered the same year as the novel Red Dragon by Thomas Hardy, which of course featured Hannibal Lecter, another villain that you absolutely are captivated by and kind of root for in a weird, fucked up sort of way. So, you know, I was trying to come up with this villainous character. I decided to let him, the villain, be the matinee idol, to be, you know, handsome and suave and debonair and charming, and the supposed good guy, the guy that fights on the forces of law, to be savage and brutal and ugly. And, you know, I will fully admit at the time, my first several instances of fleshing out this narrative are pretty crude, and, you know, I'm learning as I go. But I was just determined to get better with every single. There you go. He's got him.
Look at that. Beautiful.
Determined to be better with every single time I did something. You know, I mean, I keep telling young wannabes that come to see me, you know, you are your own best and worst critic. You know, you have to continually never be satisfied with what you did. You know, you always have to have the attitude of like, next time's going to be better. Next time's going to be better. Next time's going to be better. And you know, one of the best educators you ever have is seeing your own work in print, because you know, you can, when you're just drawing for yourself, you can, you know, draw a figure and you can like, well, that hand's kind of messed up, but good enough. You see 5,000 copies of that hand that's messed up, you can't deny it's messed up anymore, right? And you have to try and get better.
And now you see it all over the internet when you mess it up.
Yep.
So when you
a very unforgiving venue for sure. So
when you were putting it together,
that's how Grendel came about.
Did you have an overarching?
Absolutely not.
Story? Okay, so you really were making. It was really seat of the pants.
I was making it up as I went along. You know, okay. So, you know, we did the first several black and white issues there that Dave showed us of Grendel, and then the decision was made at Kamiko that we needed to go color, and so they had a book lined up by Chuck Dixon, who has since gone on to become a incredibly successful comic writer.
Yeah.
And his, at the time, wife, and they did a book called Evangeline, which was it's set in the future and about an assassin nun, a nun who's a secret covert assassin for the Vatican. And at that time, and I think this is still the case, it really behooved a publisher to do what they call group printing, which meant that the printing press is wide enough, and they use these sheets of paper that are wide enough that you could print two books side by side. So you really, if you're going to print one book, you might as well print two, because it's going to cost you the same, right?
Yeah.
And so they offered me the chance to come up with a color series, and that turned out to be Mage. And so I was willing to just kind of let Grendel behind, that I was onto this new narrative, this new, you know, which was not about a villain and color, etc. And after a couple issues of Mage, I started to get feedback from people saying, hey, whatever happened to Grendel? You just dumped that in the middle of the story. So I reinterpreted Grendel to be a backup feature in Mage, a 4-page backup feature. And that ultimately became the first Grendel collected graphic novel called Devil by the Deed.
Yep. And
I was Tom's question there. So we get to the end of Mage, and Kamiko approaches me and said, hey, we'd like to do a Grendel monthly. I said, well, I just killed him. So, we're going to do that. So I went back and thought about it. And there again, taking inspiration from stuff I liked in my own youth, I thought about The Phantom, the comic strip by Lee Falk. And, you know, in The Phantom, he's like the 23rd Phantom. You know, it's an ongoing character that gets handed down from father to father over generations. And I thought, well, why can't I do that with Grendel? Why can't I have another person become Grendel? You know, become obsessed in some fashion and take on the same certainly not for the same motivations, but take on the same persona and wear the same
Right.
mask and have the same visual identity. And so that's what I did. And Tom, to answer your question, yeah, I was just making that shit up as I went along. Every time I was like, now what am I going to do? Now what am I going to do? Because I really wanted to change it drastically every time. Not only motivation, not only narrative, but also visual style.
Yeah.
We really wanted to make it so that nobody knew what we were going to do. You didn't know what was coming next. Because
Yeah.
I've always had this attitude that it's kind of my job to take my readers somewhere they don't expect. If they know where I'm going to take them, I've kind of failed, and so yeah, we were just mixing it up like as much as we could continually. So
nice.
Do you think that's the key to the longevity? Because it's every time, because you keep pivoting.
Yeah, because literally, man, I never know where it's going. It's every time I'm like, okay, now this. Okay, now this. This new one that's getting ready to come out. Oh, this is a good segue too. This new one kind of turns everything on its ear as well. From the past, I don't know, probably 15 years of the story and the where the narrative had gone. So there's certain familiar aspects, but everything's changed. To quote the Coen brothers again.
And that's what I think. That's what I think most about Grendel is the thing is like whenever you announce a new Grendel project, I always think, well, I wonder what the hell he's going to do now.
Yeah.
And I don't generally get that. I don't generally get that with other creators because I sort of know what they're going to do now. But with you, it's like
you boldly go where no one has gone before.
But also it's like I don't know, but I'm intrigued because it's like you've paid it off in the past, so now I want to.
Yeah, and it's still always going to be Grendel. You know what I mean?
Right.
It's still always going to be this. In case nobody's noticed, shit doesn't work out in Grendel. It's a very grim book. I mean, everything usually comes to a terrible ending. And I balance that by I have Mage, which is a very hopeful kind of you succeed in spite of yourself sort of scenario. So I get the best of both worlds there.
The book with the nice dashing main character that looks kind of similar to somebody that we know.
Yeah,
Mr. Matchstick.
Yeah, who has the same evolving hairline.
But did you have the big ponytail at one time?
I did at one point. Yep.
Hyper says he loved Evangeline. Geekman says sticks out like a sore thumb for sure. Talking about the if you misdraw a hand, right? David A. Scooter says thank you to Matt. Benjamin Soto, thank you for joining us tonight. He says, is the Netflix Grendel series still happening?
So what happened with the Netflix Grendel series? I will say we're not completely hopeless, but what was done is done. So for those that don't know, several years ago, Netflix ordered up a Grendel series, a live-action Grendel series. They took it all the way through to filming completion. All that was left was a bunch of post-production work. All 8 episodes. I have them all on DVD. The first one's completely done. The other remaining 7 episodes are all edited together, but need a bunch of post-production work done. So around that same time is when all of a sudden Netflix, which had been this, comet rise of success,
right,
all of a sudden became a dumpster fire. They were just bleeding subscribers left and right. It became totally hip for whatever reason I can't figure out to hate on Netflix. And their stock took a huge crash dive, lost 70 to 80% fast. When that happens, management goes crazy, and they started a vast managerial purge. We lost the executive that was in charge of our show. And the guy that inherited it was just never into it. He kept saying, I don't get this show. I don't understand it. It's a comic book show. Where's the superpowers? Where's the pew, pew, pew? Where's the good guy? It's like, well, no, it's a little different. There is no good guy. It's like the main character is a charismatic psychopath.
So it was 80s television, comic book television then. They didn't get
it. And I equate it to when a new alpha lion comes into a pride and takes over. He murders all the cubs from the previous alpha. That's what happened.
Oh,
they just shelved it. They decided to take a $50 million tax cut instead of Aaron.
So
I know
here's a
it
question
just-
for you, and this I may be jumping on Tom's question. Are you in a position, or is there a possibility for you to? I know you've got it on.
We were
3D,
allowed to
but
shop it
can-
around. Nobody bid.
Really?
Yeah, because it still needs about 10 million in post production.
Okay.
right. So it's
And
not.
that's not an insignificant number, you know.
Right. No.
So
No, it's not.
and the guy at Dark Horse told me half of that was securing the music rights. You know, the original series is set in the 80s. They updated it to being in the 90s, so it's full of stuff like Radiohead, Smashing Pumpkins, Nine Inch Nails, et cetera, none of which is cheap.
Yeah.
You know?
Well, Brian made a point to point out your shirt. So music rights, huh?
Right.
So all I will say is I don't think we've seen the end of it yet, but that's all I can say for now. And
Let's hope.
if things work out, it'll be very surprising. So
we need another gold rush period of streaming television.
yeah.
It seems to be so fractured now. Everybody's getting their own platform. Go ahead.
You would think that because the Grendel concept is so different conceptually from a superhero show, that if some executive was tired of the Marvel stuff or the DC stuff and was like, well, there's still an opportunity here to do something different. Why, other than the fact that they're all just scared people in suits and ties, why would they not?
Well, they are that.
Yeah.
This is another good segue, which will lead us into something we'll talk about a little bit later. I sent the DVD to my Dracula collaborator and artist, Kelly Jones, the magnificent Kelly Jones.
Yeah, we love Kelly.
And he said the same thing to me. He's like, oh my God, everybody complains about how every superhero movie is the same these days. Same motivation, same origin stories, same character arcs. He's like, this is not that. This would have been a huge shot in the arm.
Yeah.
Some guy didn't care. So
yeah,
short-sightedness.
Benjamin Soto has he goes, is there a chance the episodes can be leaked? Wink, wink, nudge, what nudge?
Can't come for me because the episodes I have all have my name watermarked on them. So comes for me, it'll be pretty evident. And Netflix will be mighty pissed. So.
Yeah, you better not do that. He does say though, can you tell us if you, as the creator, were you happy how it all turned out when you watched it? Were you like, yeah, that's cool, that's what I want?
Yes, pretty much. There were certain limitations that I wish we could have gotten past, and I don't know, maybe hopefully someday. That being, for instance, and I had said this for years, that if we ever went to a live action adaptation, Argent couldn't be a werewolf. Because not only does he chew up your budget, like all your budget, he steals all the attention away from Grendel, from the guy in the mask. And that just doesn't work in a live action visual reality,
Right.
No, I liked a lot of it. It was challenging in many, many ways. It had a real character-driven emotional depth. The guy who played Grendel, who was a young, this is also tragic, and I'm surprised they killed us for this fact alone in the contemporary culture that we live in. The guy who was cast to play Grendel was the first Muslim Arab American who was cast in a lead role in a comic book film. Abu Bakr Ali, his name is, and they wove that in. It was not like his ethnicity was not a huge part of the narrative, and he looked great in as Hunter Rose. He looked great in the costume, and we thought that was kind of like, well, they're never going to cancel that, but generally overall, I thought it was really terrific. My everybody I've shown it to said, God, I really wanted season 2 by the time I got to the end of season 1. Season 1 ended on a very haunting note that I thought was just terrific, great visual storytelling. It was definitely an adaptation because that's what it needs to be.
Right.
It delivered, though. I thought it delivered on a lot of fronts.
Yeah.
So,
well, and I think that's important. Yeah, it's at the creator. If you're happy, with what they've done, then the net says good things about it. Brian does say, "Oh, that's so frustrating for this old Grendel fan." I think he meant to hear. And he says, "I imagine it will
this Grendel creator to hear too, man."
I imagine it will turn up at conventions like Star Wars Holiday Special and the Corman Fantastic Four movie. Oh my goodness!
So what did? Here's the
every copy I know of has whoever it went out to has their name watermark on it. So
they'll know unless you have a private screening at your house. Yeah. So the real question though is, would it have moved Grendel action figures?
Well, okay, this is the terribly frustrating part. So in the past year, we did this this all new telling of the Hunter Rose story called Devil by the Deed Masters Edition.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
And the way that came about was, Dark Horse had decided to reissue the omnibus editions. Previously, they had issued them in digest size. Now they were issuing them in full comic book size. And, we knew we needed something fresh on the market to take advantage of the show. And when I went back and looked at the original Devil by the Deed, since it was serialized in these 4-page chunks in Mage, even I was kind of surprised to realize it's only 37 pages long. And considering the impact it had, the legacy it generated, that's really short, So I said to Dark Horse, let me come back to this and let me retell this completely top to bottom. I'll expand it to 121 pages. And I'm drawing it now in my early 60s as opposed to my mid 20s, and they thought it was a great idea. So again, we had all this merchandising and new publishing plans in place to be supported by a TV show, and then there's no TV show. Man. So I mean, everything's still sold okay, but not as good as it would have been if there was a TV show to support it.
Right.
I can tell you that I've read the iterations from. What was it? It was like issue 9 to 14 in the backup. And then, of course, the first graphic novel that came out with it. And then I did get the new release. And the Masters Edition. The Masters Edition. And I can tell you that the day I got that, I finished it first night, just sucked into it. So
right on.
Just continued it. It's awesome work.
Thanks.
Very fantastic.
Thanks. So. I got to give props here to my son, who's my regular colorist.
Yep. And
of course, we did it in black, white, and red, which over the years has kind of become Grendel's Hunter Rose's motif.
Mm-hmm.
That wasn't the way originally, but after the 2 black, white, and red series, we just said, boy, that really that kind of noirish thing, that dangerous noirish thing with the red thrown in really fits him. So everything Hunter Rose is now black, white, and red. And he did a really great job at coloring my renderings,
Well,
so that brings up an interesting question, though. Oh, sorry, Dave. You go ahead.
Let Dave finish.
I was just going to say that the cover, the alternate cover that ended up actually for Achilles Has Landed Kayla's book, the black, white, and red thing that I used, a big influence was the Grendel books.
Oh, great! It's awesome. Glad to hear it.
The one that I did for Silverline, so coloring that came from there. So
right on. Thanks. Tom, what were you going to say?
Well, I'm fascinated by the fact that your son colors it.
Yeah.
So because, the father-son relationship is sometimes fraught with potholes and minefields.
Sure is.
And so what's that like?
It works out great. I mean, it's not like we don't butt heads on the odd occasion, but pretty rarely. We kind of, I keep saying we speak the same visual language. He kind of grew up in my studio, and there's just not a whole lot of direction I give him. Occasionally he'll come and say to me, hey, what about this? And I give him a specific answer. But generally I just go. And one of my favorite things is when he comes back to me and he's colored something completely different than the way I originally pictured it. And that's always very gratifying and invigorating. It's like, damn, that looks great. That wasn't the way I was picturing it all, and I love it. So
how did he get interested in it? Was he did he have like?
So again, I have 2 kids. I have a son and a daughter. Like my wife, my daughter doesn't have any interest in comics at all. But my son, he bit hard when he was young, because he had access to my library, and I started taking him to conventions. He was 12 or 13 years old, and I was taking him to dinner with Frank Miller. I mean, he grew up in the thick of it, and And he knew he wanted to do something visual and creative, but he didn't know what that was going to be. He thought maybe photography at first for a while, maybe film, and then he just kind of gradually, through no real impetus of me not pushing him at all, he kind of came back to comics and decided he wanted to try coloring. And I will say he's got a new series out now from Dark Horse Comics. So we live in Portland, Oregon, and there's a local clothing line called Portland Gear. And if you can imagine a Letterman P, like that would be on a fraternity shirt, and the circle inside the P is the shape of Oregon. Okay, that line is immensely popular in Portland, and Brennan used to share a studio with that guy downtown. So a couple years ago, he contacted Brennan. He's like, I want you to come up with a superhero that's going to be our brand superhero. And so Brennan and one of his best buddies, who's a former collaborator of mine, Dan Scotty, who drew the 75th anniversary relaunch of The Spirit Returns that I wrote, they came up with this character called St. John, which is an area and a bridge in Portland. It means a lot to Portland people. And I think the third issue is getting ready to come out pretty soon. It's a 4-issue thing. It's worked out really great for them. The clothing company does, like, St. John wears a specific type of hat and jacket. They've produced all those that are for sale at their stores, and certain design work from the comic are on T-shirts and hats and etc. And the real neat part about it is the star of the comic is Portland. I mean, there's, you have the main character who's more of a do-gooder than almost a mystical do-gooder more than a crime fighter.
Right.
But somehow narratively they've managed to make the city the star of the book. So, yeah, as you can tell, I'm real proud of him. He's
cool.
He's
good.
And he and I work really well together. So of course he colored all of the third Mage series. He's colored he colored the Grendel versus the Shadow that I did for Dynamite. He colored that I did for Dynamite and Dark Horse. He colored the Shadow, the Death of Margot Lane. He's now coloring he colored Devil's Odyssey, the previous Grendel Prime series I did, and now he's coloring the all new series, Devil's Crucible.
Nice.
Here's a name you might know, Mr. Dave Ulbrich. Dave,
there you go.
What is
there you
up,
go. Thanks,
Mr.
Dave.
Bro?
Oh, Dave, good to hear from you, man.
He said, I just read St. John the other day, and I loved it.
Wow, there you go.
I'll pass that on to him. Everybody likes getting props.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. Yep. So, Matt, I don't know how much you know about Mr. Belcher over there, but
yes, I know plenty about Mike.
Yeah. So Aiden is also.
I think Mike has a drawing of his character by me.
Yeah.
There it is.
So Aiden, his son, works with him as well. Yep. Yeah, that's kind of cool.
Yeah, what really was cool was when we were doing Mage, the Hero Denied, the third part, which of course was Kevin Matchstick and his family. Mike and Aiden would write in quite a bit, and it was very gratifying to hear that generational appreciation coming in.
Yeah,
and
I raised him good. I tried to.
Kind of reflected in their reading experiences. What would you say, Mike? Sorry, I didn't hear you.
I said I raised him well. At least I tried.
Yes, I guess you did. Yeah.
I can attest to
that. I don't get this one, Pop. Dropping some love over here too. Pops does have a question though. He says, what is your favorite album cover?
Oh, Jesus. That's like asking for my favorite kid. I used to drive my kids crazy when they were growing up because I don't have favorites. I have too many things I love.
Yeah.
I'd be like, what's your favorite movie? What's your favorite food? What's your favorite blah, 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 blah. I'd be like, look, I don't have favorites. If I'm in this mood, I like pasta. If I'm in this mood, I like chicken. If I'm in this mood, I like steak.
Right.
I have a favorite wife. I have a favorite son. And I have a favorite daughter. That's about it. I don't know. It depends on what mood I'm in. I guess, if you had to point to the most iconic album cover of all time, it's probably Sgt. Pepper's. But, I love the first Ramones album cover too for completely different reasons.
Yeah.
So,
right.
Yeah. So I'm going to ask a question that I don't know much about, other than the fact I saw when we were putting this stuff together for our thumbnails and stuff. Apparently, you did some artwork for Villains and Vigilantes.
Oh yeah.
So now are
Yeah.
you a gamer at all or
Not much. I
No.
was a little
Okay.
bit way back in the day, but when I first dropped out of school, we set up a group studio, and one of the members was Bill Willingham,
Oh yeah, of course.
writer of the Elementals,
Yeah.
and of course, Bill had some publishing history within the game world, and there was a group called Fantasy Games Unlimited up on, I think, Long Island in New York. And we did a handful of things for Fantasy Games Unlimited. We
mean you and Bill Willingham.
And some other guys in my studio were vaguely involved as well. But we did. There was a game called World, PSI World.
Yeah.
That was kind of like Scanners, the David Cronenberg movie Scanners.
I played way too many games in college.
Yeah. So we did the interior, the cover and the interior art for that. There was another one called Flashing Blades that was basically Three Musketeers as a RPG.
Okay.
There was, I can't remember. There were one or two others, but it was just a way to like help pay some bills there in the early days.
I was just curious about that because I play I played a lot of war games, but I didn't play a whole lot of D&D. But my D&D was a game called Super World, which was kind of had companions to V&V, and there was another one. There was another superhero one I've forgotten right now. Champions. Oh yeah, Champions.
Okay.
And so we played a lot of that stuff. So when I saw that, I'm like, what? I don't remember any of that, but very cool. So
yeah, I won't say those games made us rich, but
yeah,
they did help pay some bills. So
I think at one point in time, I think Super World was up for sale like a decade ago. I don't think anything ever happened. Never came of it. Steve Perrin did a lot of art for. He wasn't one of the guys in your studio, was he? Guy by the name of Steve Perrin.
Steve who?
Perrin?
No.
Okay.
Now it was Bill Willingham, Neil Vokes. Does everybody know Neil Vokes?
Oh yeah. Okay.
And Rich Rankin, who inked the first Devil by the Deed, and also co-created Eagle with Neil Vokes.
Yeah.
Bill Cucinato, who was one of the early Kamiko dudes.
Don't know that name.
Some other people drifted in and out. They were only there kind of temporarily, but
yeah. Infrafan has a question. He says, I really dug the Django Zorro crossover. Is there another fun crossover that you would love to work on?
Well, okay, I'll tell you a couple stories about crossovers. So the Batman Grendel crossover, which happened, of course, back in the early 90s, that was kind of lined up in the late 80s by Kamiko's interaction with DC. And I had almost nothing to do with lining that up. They said, "Look, we're gonna line this up. We're gonna do a Grendel Batman crossover." Okay, great. So we did that, and then of course Kamiko went down into bankruptcy hell, and that tied up that book. It sat on the shelf for I think 2.5 or 3.5 years, completely finished, still awaiting payments to me and the colorists and etc. Then we later. Then when Grendel finally ended up at Dark Horse, we did Batman Grendel 2. And then for a while, I kept getting approached by like literally every indie comic book creator you can imagine. They wanted to do a crossover with Grendel. And, I was just like, well, come on, man. Where do I go after Batman? There's nowhere to go, sideways or down. I'm just not that interested in something else, Until years later, Dynamite said to me, what do you think about a Shadow Grendel crossover? And I'm a giant Shadow fan and have been since I was a teenager. And of course, the Shadow inspired Batman. And I was like, yeah, that's the one I'll do,
Yeah.
The way Django Zorro came about was, so Nick Barucci, who's the owner of Dynamite Comics, Dynamite Entertainment, was friends with Reggie Hudlin, who has written a bunch of cool comics, some really great Black Panther stuff, but he was the producer on Django Unchained. And I just loved Django Unchained, man. A friend of mine was a local reviewer, and he took me to a press screening, and we got to the end of it, and I turned to him, look, if I was a young black man, which obviously I'm not, that would be my Star Wars. Like, I would watch that like 900 times, And, so they said to me, hey, we're talking with Quentin Tarantino about doing and at this point I'd been writing the Zorro comic for about 3 years. talking about with Quentin about doing a Django Zorro crossover. Would you be interested in co-writing that with him? And I was like, well, that's never going to happen. But yeah, okay, sure. And totally forgot about it. And I don't know, 6-8 weeks later, they called me and they said, hey, remember that thing we spoke to you about? Well, we sent Quentin all your Grendel hell, all your Zorro comics, and he loves them, and he wants you to come down to his house next week. And I was like, okay, sure, let's do that. So
yeah, twist my arm.
Like, I kept saying to my wife, this is gonna fall apart at any minute. Like any little thing's gonna creep up, and that's the end of that. Because of course Quentin's kind of famous for announcing other projects, other possibilities, other maybes, other sequels, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. They never come through. So I even got I flew down to LA and I got a rental car. I drove to his house, and I was just like, I'm at the gate, and I'm just like, this. Even now, it's gonna fall through. Like it's gonna be like, well, sorry, Sam Jackson showed up, couldn't do it. And, yeah, nope. Rang me in, met me at the door, took me to show me his comics collection like right away. We spent like 2 days hanging out and watching movies in his screening room. At that point had a huge, really cool screening room because he likes to watch movies with people he's just starting to work with to get in kind of the same headspace vibe,
Yeah.
And
Makes sense.
And so I was there overnight. We had a great first day, and then I went back. And there was no guarantee I was going to get invited back the second day because I might be a dick. You know what I mean? We might not get along right at all. But we didn't. We got along famously like right from the get go. We're like the same age. We were just connecting on all the same levels. He had just gotten back from San Diego, and he had a huge stack of the Marvel black and white mags from the 70s, like Deadly Hands of Kung Fu, The Zombie Lives, Dracula, etc. I love those too. And so we just sat flipping through those for about an hour. Go, oh, fuck, I remember this part, And anyway, so it all went so well. He's like, no, you got to come back tomorrow. You got to come back tomorrow before my flight was in the afternoon. And so I went back to my hotel room and I pounded out like the first 6 pages of the script just to get us both on the same page, and came back the next day, and it just all went great again. And we went from there. It all turned out terrific.
Wow.
That's great to hear.
Yeah. It was a fun experience. Yeah.
So do you still go to his house and hang out?
No, he has since gotten married, and he married an Israeli woman, and he got trapped in Israel for several years during the pandemic. They had gone to visit her parents when the giant shutdown happened. He was in Israel for a couple of years. I don't know where the hell he is now. He doesn't live in that same house anymore. So
wow.
Has a kid now too. So that impedes on your time, right, Mike?
Yeah, that changes. Yeah. Infrafan says, awesome story. Thank you for answering my question. Should go without saying, but I love your work.
Thanks, man.
It should never go without saying.
That's right. It should never go. As said earlier, you always want to hear that, right? You guys, somebody else got a question?
Yeah, I got a question. I was curious, with Master's Edition, did you do anything in there to kind of synergize with the TV show?
Yeah.
I was curious.
Yeah, specifically, so Teddy Ciccone, the mob boss that Grendel first starts working for as an assassin and then ultimately takes over from, I drew him to kind of look like the guy that played him in the TV show. Additionally, in the TV show, there's a Teddy's at odds with the Russian mob. Mm-hmm. And I threw in a few pages in there with a Russian mobster and his 2 sons who bear the same names as the characters in the show and look kind of like them as well. So yeah, I did synergize a bit without sacrificing my version.
Right. Yeah. So, I was just curious about that.
No, it's a great question.
So done in conjunction with it. I was curious.
Yep.
But yeah, I just and one more thing before I let everybody do it. I've got a great process question. With Mage, you said you just sit in front of the page and you let it take you. Do you do that with Grendel?
No. One of the things I used to do, not as much anymore, just because I'm so. I'll just say I'm a Jedi Master at this point. But in my younger days, what I would do is I would take a sheet of paper and I would I would make a flow chart with little rectangles of all the pages. So let's say it was 22, 24, 26, in the old days it was even 28 pages in a typical comic. And I would have them just laid out as a grid. And then I would go through and just write a word or two that happened that
On
told
that
me. And that way I got to see the story as a continuous sketch, basically.
Right.
I got to see how it progressed. And sometimes it'd be like fight and then just an arrow going for 4 pages,
Yeah.
But that enabled me to view the story as, I always say I write like an artist and I draw like a writer. And that was really an illustration of that I found it easier to consider a story when I saw it visually represented in front of me in this very skeletal fashion,
So that brings up my process question, because you still work, if I read this correctly, you still work on paper.
Yeah. Yep.
You draw it like it always has been.
Yeah, old dog, new tricks,
But your son colors on the computer, right?
Yes, he does. In fact, here's a cover.
Wait, here we go.
Nice.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, look at that.
Dang.
Nice.
That's awesome. Look at that.
Sweet.
Yes, you still draw. I don't know, man. I like the tactility of touching the boards and the pen, and I understand. When I see people drawing digitally, I was like, damn, that looks a whole lot easier. And just can't get behind it. Whatever. But luckily, can still work this way and make it work. So
yeah, no, it's I think whatever works.
I'm the same with books. I'm still not an e-reader. I still like holding a wad of paper in my hands. I like feeling where I am in the book, with my actual fingers,
Right.
I can't read digitally either.
Yeah.
Can't do it.
I got in I'm not going to call it an argument. I would say maybe a debate last week at a show. A guy, because I'll stand on this, right? The guy said, I read this, I read that. I said, and I knew him, right? I said, so wait, did you read it? He goes, oh no, I listened to it on tape. I said,
Audible,
did you read it?
Yeah, my son does.
I'm like,
Audible, yeah.
That's not the
And
same.
that is a
I'm
whole
like,
debate, isn't it?
It is, yeah. It's like, hey, look, thumbs up to you for listening to it. Yeah. But it's not reading. You
It's
use
not
different
quite
muscles.
the same. It's not quite. I don't know. I guess we need another term for it, because listening doesn't quite give it the right.
It does.
You're processing more information than just listening. You know what I mean?
It's bedtime story.
Yeah, it's more than that, though. I mean, if you're reading something complex, like my son, after the Dune movies came out, he went through a whole stint where he went through 14 of the Dune books. So those fuckers are dense,
They're
That's
big, yeah.
That's not just listening. There's more to it than that. So I don't know. I guess we need a new term.
Yeah.
I'm not the one to coin that term, but
Yeah. I made him mad, though, because he was like, I'm telling people I'm reading these books, and you're telling me I'm not reading them. I'm like, you're not.
yeah.
I'm like, you can close your eyes, and you can listen to it. That's not
at
reading.
the same time, in defense of all that, I know from my wife the hurdles that young people face in the distractions that are thrown at them by their goddamn phones and screens. If anybody's doing Audible, hey, more power to you.
Listen,
you're intaking narrative. So
I'm 100% with you. I think I'd rather hear someone or have someone tell me I listened to a novel, right? Than I listened to a bunch.
And I
of
watch
podcasts
TikTok for 3 hours. Yeah,
right, exactly. Yeah, but I argue it's not the same.
If I'm listening to music, I'm not playing the guitar.
Yeah,
No.
true that.
Yeah.
Well, and I think that's one of the problems with listening.
But
to stuff
okay, but
because-
the same thing. If you're reading a book, you're not writing a book.
Oh, there. Okay. Now I'm undone by my own logic.
Yeah.
This is an interesting question here. Matthew says, I have 8 followers for my upcoming paranormal investigation comic on Kickstarter. Any advice on how to get more?
Okay, so he is referring to the Kickstarter that I did. This is a great segue as well, which we'll move into with Kelly Jones for our Dracula project.
Yeah.
More on that in a second. I can't really offer advice because Kelly and I both knew we were ignorant noobs in that regard, and we hired people to run
it for you. Okay,
and they did a magnificent job. Super fan promotions with David Hyde as the lead talent in that regard. So this leads us into my Dracula project with Kelly Jones.
Yeah.
So Kelly and I have known each other a bazillion years. We first met when we both contributed art to the lion's share of art to Neil Gaiman's most popular Sandman run, Season of Mists. I contributed one chapter, which was the first chapter that led to the Dead Boy Detectives story arc and characters. Kelly and I met on various signing appearances with Neil during that time period. We immediately clicked. We both have an overwhelming love of horror literature and narrative in every fashion, and we have a similar sense of humor and etc. So we immediately became big buds. Kelly later drew one of the Grendel Black, White, and Red stories for me, but we always over the years said we've got to do something together someday, and by saying something, we meant something significant, not just a little 8-page one-off like in Grendel. Right. So I want to say about 3 years ago now, I had posted something on Facebook, and Kelly came back and said, yeah, we really got to work together someday. And I contacted him privately, and I said, are you serious about that, man? Because I actually have an idea for us now, because I had been brewing on this. I've been a big Dracula fan for years, and I had been brewing on some way to approach Dracula, a new way to approach Dracula. And I said, but it's going to take some real commitment and some effort on both of our parts without getting paid, because I think we want to do this as a Kickstarter. I'll talk about that in a second. But it'll take 4 or 5, maybe even 6 years of our lives, maybe more. Who knows? And luckily, it was just the right time for both of us. He was like, yeah, I am totally on board. Because, I said to him, and here's what I have in mind. And I described it to him. We decided to do it as a Kickstarter because, again, I've been kind of at the vanguard of the indie comics publishing front for decades now, since the very beginning, pretty much. And this whole new crowdfunding thing was just something I felt like I needed to try. It was like, I got to give this a shot. We got to figure out how this works. It's certainly not apt for every project I do. I have no interest in taking Grendel away from Dark Horse and doing Grendel that way. But this just seemed the right way to launch this Dracula project with Kelly and I. So what the Dracula project turned out to be is it's going to be at least 4 different graphic novels, and every version of Dracula you see in film, of which there are just a bunch, they all claim this is the most faithful adaptation ever done. and none of them are, none of them are.
Yeah.
And I have firm opinions on all of them. I have a love-hate relationship with all of them. So my idea was, look, I've read this novel over and over and over again. I have 5 different annotated versions. I have studied this fucker up and top and bottom, and I know this book inside and out. And there's a lot to be told here without retelling the novel. That's the key. We're not retelling the novel. We are telling all the stuff around the novel. The novel features Dracula very sparingly. Like when Harker goes to the castle at the beginning of the book, Dracula's on stage quite a bit. As soon as Dracula gets to London, he's gone. Like he's hardly on stage at all. And throughout it all, there's all these intriguing comments and hints about his motivations and his history. And we are filling all of that in. And so we're telling all the stuff around the novel, not the novel. So you will not see the events of the novel. You will not see Harker. You will not see Van Helsing. You will not see Mina and Lucy and any of that. We're telling all the stuff around the novel.
I like it all.
When we got into it, as I was writing the first graphic novel, I kept saying, I'm writing it. And I'm like, oh, Kelly's going to draw this. Just awesome. Oh, this part, Kelly's going to draw this. Awesome. And then his pencils would come in. And it was way better than I was even predicting, And so we really, we just had a blast through all of it. It just felt like this was the project we were born to do together, And I got to say, I think it's Kelly's magnum opus. I mean, it is like the best thing I've ever seen him do, and that's saying a lot because that guy's very accomplished.
Yeah.
And one of my big caveats I hold high here is that when we first announced this, I announced it on Twitter X, and I got a response from Leslie Klinger, who has written a bunch of annotated versions of a bunch of different classic. You did the very extensively annotated Sherlock Holmes. You did a very extensively annotated Dracula, Frankenstein, Jekyll and Hyde. He's considered one of the world's foremost Dracula scholars. And he says, "Oh, this is very exciting, and I would love to be involved in this any way I can." And I said, "Well, Les, we're already done with the first book, but we'd love to show it to you and see, if you want to give us a quote, that'd be great. But whatever." And he gave us this just glowing quote to where I felt like, wow, Professor Dracula gave us an A. But the first book is all done, and I just got word that it just hit the docks, is coming to be shipped, and book 2, which I've written and Kelly's about halfway drawing, will launch as a Kickstarter this next Halloween. We launched the first one on Halloween. The next at least 4 Halloweens, you're going to see a Kickstarter for a new Dracula OGN from me and Kelly. And
sweet.
And they believe me, we're really thrilled with all of it.
So I don't want to name names, but if there was someone in the corner square here who didn't get his Kickstarter in on time to get a book, how would they get a book?
So we also made a deal with Dark Horse to release a mass trade paperback edition.
There we go.
The Kickstarters are hardcovers only. So you get a hardcover, which we had both variant cover, main cover by Kelly, variant cover by me, and then a limited signed and numbered edition.
Okay.
But if
Nice.
you just want to pick it up from Dark Horse, I think that comes out in October as well. So just in time for Halloween. Yep.
Nice.
Very good.
Yeah.
Let me also add, colored by the magnificent Jose Villarrubia, who
Nice.
we originally thought of because of the recent restoration work he's done on Bernie Wrightson's original run on Swamp Thing, and then the Richard Corbin complete library for Dark Horse as well. And oh my God, he just did such a gorgeous job. Kelly and I really wanted this to be a love letter to the horror comics that we grew up with. So it's not what I would term overcolored. Jose really knew how to hold back and color in a very old school fashion that just evokes those comics that really set Kelly and I both on fire for this medium that we call our own way back when we were teens. So
because Kelly, I consider Kelly one of the 3 great cape artists.
Yeah.
Well, Tom, you remember Kelly did a gravestone cover for us.
Yeah, because it's
Uh-huh.
it's magnificent.
Yeah.
He has, and the thing about it is it's such a unique style, but it's not so out there that you don't recognize it as comic.
No, everything. The thing about so here was the thing about Jose and coloring Kelly. When Jose first came on board, I said to him, "Look, man, here's my opinion. I have hated most versions of Kelly's work colored because the colorists look at his work and they say, oh, he's dark and moody and atmospheric, and I'm going to color it dark and moody and atmospheric.
Right?
No, he's already done all that in the line work.
Yeah.
He needs to be colored brightly so that we see those shadows. We see them breathe,
You want to see the lines.
Pulse with menace. Yeah.
Yeah.
So I said to him, Jose specifically, I said, go look at Dario Argento's early work, specifically Suspiria, the film Suspiria, and Mario Bava's early work, specifically Black Sabbath, not Black Sunday. He did 2 films. One's black and white, Black Sabbath, which is an anthology film with one of the narrator is Boris Karloff. He stars in one of the storylines, but the specifically Black Sabbath, is lit up like a pinball machine. It's garish as can be, and it's still so scary. I was like, that's the approach we need. And boy, he pulled it off in spades. Really,
Nice.
really, really just beautiful as can be. Again, capturing that old school style of coloring,
Yeah. We talk about that occasionally on our channel here about how so many of the modern comics are just over rendered, over colored, and they just end up muddy. And no one.
Well, because I will say, not to disparage anybody, but I think the modern colorist is trying to prove too hard that he's an artist too.
Yeah.
And in fact, the best colorists, I will include my son here, but also Dave Stewart is, somebody that immediately leaps to mind.
Right.
Best colorists, it looks like that's the way the artist himself would have colored it. Not trying to add too much on top. Trying to only accentuate what the black and white artist has already done.
I think Laura Martin does that on Simonson.
Yeah, I agree with that too. Yeah, yep. Again, those aren't the only examples. There are many,
right?
But there are also many who try too hard, as we've all just kind of agreed.
And
too many effects, too many goddamn flares and airbrush effects, and
just because they invented it doesn't mean you have to use it.
Yeah, exactly.
Sparingly. Of course, I'm biased. Of course, I can't
Sparingly.
find a copy. Right?
It's like spice in a dish. Here's my cook side coming out. You don't want to just shake that shit in there.
Well, just Star Wars.
I'm biased, but I think Roberta is also in that group.
Yeah.
Roberta who? Who's Roberta?
Roberta Conroy. She
Conroy.
is usually on with us on Sundays.
Yep.
So she's exceptionally talented as well. There's so I've got that we're a little over an hour here. I do have one other question here. Matthew asked, did you work on Superman at all?
Well, I did Trinity, the first Trinity series, which was I will take credit for that title. That was totally me. That was the story. God, when did that happen? Back in the 2000s, of how Batman and Superman first meet Wonder Woman. And that was my. No, that's not true. That was my first time working on Superman. Then in Superman Red and Blue, the limited color miniseries they did recently, which is kind of like Grendel, Black, White, and Red. I did an 8-page story in that too, which I was, oh God, you guys are going to lead me down a giant rabbit hole here, which I can't climb out of. The nice thing about that was I was able to do it as a period piece. I'm just of a firm opinion that all these pop culture characters, they work best in the time and the place they were created. They keep trying to update these people. Could anybody believe that Bruce Wayne could maintain a secret identity? No. And everybody talks about Superman's glasses. Well, my parents are back from that era. People weren't photographed all the time. I have my parents were in their 20s and the 30s, and I have 2 or 3 photos of them before the 50s, the 1950s. Yeah. So, you've got to figure at an event, when Superman shows up to help somebody, he's not going to stick around and wait for photographers to come. So people wouldn't recognize that this guy just has glasses on, Similarly, the shadow doesn't work in a time and a place when every man in the street doesn't have a hat on.
Right. Yeah.
Otherwise, who's that asshole in the hat?
I bet that's the shadow.
And not only that, he only works in a time and a place when cities still had shadows, because they don't anymore. I don't know when those time you guys were in New York, but it's lit up like a pinball machine, man.
Only Gotham City retains all the shadows.
Yeah, and that's a fictional place. Yeah, right. Similarly, James Bond, man. I want James Bond back in the Cold War paranoia and all the sexism and racism and all that stuff. All this stuff only works. Tarzan. You can't update Tarzan. The Africa has to still be a mysterious, unexplored continent for that to work. Make new characters. Don't reinvent these other characters to be.
You're singing our tune here.
Yeah. So before we go, I have. Oh, go ahead.
Infrafan, go ahead. You be next, Tom. Infrafan says Clark Kent today would work for BuzzFeed. I don't like that.
So my question before we go is, almost everybody gets together and grouses about what's wrong with comics. My question is, what's right about comics?
Yeah.
What's right about comics? Jesus, you guys, look around. Did you imagine there would be this many?
No.
Did you ever imagine this wide range of people contributing to this art field would be this diverse? I'm not saying I love everything coming out, but more power to everybody that wants to pick up a pen and draw a comic book.
Absolutely.
When I first got into the field, I never considered, when I was going to school for art, I never considered that I would be part of the comic book community or the comic book business, because you had to live near New York.
Yeah.
There was no overnight delivery. You took the train into the offices. You picked up your job in person. You took it home to Connecticut or New Jersey or wherever. You drew it or inked it or whatever, and you brought it back in person. Overnight delivery changed all that.
Yeah.
So many changes, so many different subjects. I keep. It was a long. This isn't an argument anymore, but it was a long time I had to argue that comics are a medium, not a genre.
Right.
And now,
Yep.
the people that complain about what's wrong with comics, they're complaining about what's wrong with their nostalgia for a certain kind of comic.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
And certainly that's a viable argument.
Yeah, of course.
But I don't know.
But
Look
there's
around.
so many things
try
out
some
there.
other shit. Read some comics by some people that aren't necessarily what you would consider your same ilk.
Yeah.
There's
Yeah.
plenty to be had.
Oh wait, I got one more. I got one more question though.
Okay.
Does Jeff Smith know that you think he looks like Phone Bone?
I'll tell him into his face. I think I have told him to his face. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Tom's referring to the fact that I look like Kevin Matchstick. I've said in public that this is not an unusual thing, right? The creators have been making characters that are very thinly veiled alter egos for years.
Yeah.
Charlie Brown was Charles Schultz. Period.
Yes.
If anybody knew Dave Stevens before he passed away, he was the Rocketeer. The two guys that created Superman, Siegel and Schuster, they were Clark Kent. They weren't Superman, but they were Clark Kent.
Right.
I'm Kevin Matchstick, and I always point out to the fact that Jeff Smith is Bone. There's something around it. He echo his every gesture, his every laugh and giggle is Bone. I mean. We are who we are, and we can only create what we see.
So listen, it's I can't speak for the others. It's been great talking to you, and
Absolutely.
Really good time. Good luck with the books. I will be sure to grab the Dracula one in October.
Yeah. Now, is there anything that we didn't ask you about that you're like, man, those guys didn't ask me? I really wanted to say this.
Just that the next Grendel series coming out is a 12-issue Ultimate Story arc that's broken up into 3 4-issue series. The collective title is Devil's Crucible. So it's Devil's Crucible Defiance, Devil's Crucible Sedition, and Devil's Crucible Necrotic.
And that's slated for when?
Those will come out spaced out, but those tell one overall story arc. There's some cool surprises in there that nobody's expecting.
Cool.
That'll be a lot of fun for Grendel Raiders, believe me.
Issue 3 is in last month's Diamond, so we should be having issue 1 very, very shortly.
Very soon. Yep.
I got them pre-ordered.
I think it's on Comic Buzz. There's a preview of the first 5 pages.
Nice.
Nice.
Well, I forgot to ask you something before we went live, so I'm going to take a chance here and put you on the spot. One of the things we like to do, and as soon as you see our video getting out of here, so we like to ask folks like yourself to come on to take just a second. I'd like to blow you up, put you on the screen, and then just have you say, "I'm Matt Wagner. Make mine Silverline."
Sure.
And then what I'll do is I'll clip that, and later on we'll use it like the thing that you see here the before we go.
Yep. Right.
All right, guys. Thank you so much. I will absolutely. You guys, anything else for Matt?
I mean, huge fan. Very excited for both Dracula, which I've kickstarted, and I can't wait to get it.
Right on.
and I can't wait
like
to
I
read.
said, it's at the docks. It's printed. It's on its way, baby.
I'm just so like when Dad showed me that, I'm like, oh, I need that now. And then I can't wait for this new Grendel series because like you left me off with Devil's Odyssey, like that last page of it. I'm like, I gotta know what's happening now.
Aiden, that would have happened sooner, but I had to do Devil by the Deed Masters Edition because we had a show at that point. So.
But hey, I'm glad you did that too. That was awesome.
But the sequels would have come out sooner, but reality.
That's okay. Hey, we're getting them, so that's all I'm worried about.
Yep.
And if you want to hang out for a few minutes after the show's ended, once we're not out live, we'd love to chat with you just a few minutes after the show.
Sure.
All right, so I'm gonna blow you up right here, and then excuse me, if you just take a second and say that.
Hey, I'm Matt Wagner. Make mine Silverline.
Hey, I'm G-Rod. Make mine Silverline. You heard me.